From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, Iraq under siege.
We will not be sending U.S. troops back into combat in Iraq, but I have asked my national security team to prepare a range of other options that could help support Iraq security forces, and I'll be reviewing those options in the days ahead. The United States is not simply going to involve itself in a military action in the absence of a political plan by the Iraqis that gives us some assurance that they're prepared to work together. We're not going to allow ourselves to be dragged back into a situation in which, while we're there, we're keeping a lid on things, and after enormous sacrifices by us, as soon as we're not there, suddenly people end up acting in ways that are not conducive to the long-term stability and prosperity of the country.
President Obama is facing a new crisis, this one in Iraq. Islamist insurgents overran Mosul this week, Iraq's second-largest city, captured Saddam Hussein's hometown of Tikrit, and are pressing an offensive towards Baghdad. The insurgents are primarily from a group called the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, known as ISIS. It was affiliated with al-Qaeda until a few months ago. The two organizations are now separately commanded due to a falling out over the extreme violence ISIS uses. Iraq's army appears to have been routed, raising fears that the country faces a de facto partition with Sunni radicals controlling the west, the Kurds the north, and with the Shiite-dominated al-Maliki government isolated in Baghdad. 8 months ago, after meeting with Iraq's President Nouri al-Maliki, here is how President Obama characterized the gravity of the problem.
Unfortunately, al-Qaeda has still been active and has grown more active recently. So we had a lot of discussion about how we can work together to push back against that terrorist organization that operates not only in Iraq, but also poses a threat to the entire region and to the United States.
At that time, Mr. Obama and Mr. al-Maliki developed a joint U.S.-Iraqi strategy to defeat the jihadists. Key elements included the shipment of U.S. F-16 fighters and Apache attack helicopters to give Iraq the advantage of aerial supremacy over al-Qaeda in Iraq and ISIS. 8 months later, those weapons have not been delivered to Iraq, and the insurgents have gained the upper hand. Their objective is to seize a wide swath of Iraq and eastern Syria and form a new Sunni-dominated country. If they succeed, the new state will, as President Obama himself said just last November, destabilize the region and pose a threat to the United States.
Question, what accounts for the failure of the strategy set by Presidents Obama and al-Maliki last November? Where did it go wrong, Pat?
Well, one of the failures they claim is that the United States did not get its status of forces agreement to protect our troops if we left 10,000 behind, so we took them all out. And as a consequence of that, what you got is this ISIS, John, has come roaring into Iraq. The Iraqi army of 900,000 men has virtually disintegrated west of Baghdad, and you got a real possibility of this country breaking up with the Kurds taking Kirkuk in the north, separating that out for their own Kurdistan state, ISIS dominated Sunnis in the west, and of course Baghdad and the Shia in the south. The key thing, John, that people aren't looking at here is our foremost allies in fighting ISIS are who? Hezbollah, Assad, Russia, and Iran. Iran and the United States have the same enemies in Iraq, and we've got the same real enemies, I think, real enemies in Syria. So you could see a possibility of some kind of collaboration between the United States and its ancient Iranian enemy.
Well, isn't that original thinking, huh?
Well, if that comes to pass, it could happen with Iran wants to protect the Shiite shrines, and they're worried that these extremists are going to destroy the shrines. And so they do have the same vested interest that America has in Iraq. But you saw the Iraqi army just fold, take off their uniforms, because they don't really feel loyal to the Iraqi government. They don't think of themselves as Iraqis. They think of themselves as Shiites or Sunnis or Kurds. And what you could see now is this civil war really come into a higher violence, and it's not America's job to prevent a civil war, but it is America's job to prevent Iraq from becoming a staging area for this very vicious spin-off of Al-Qaeda. And so the president is rightly considering some modest military force, air power, maybe drone attacks. I don't know that they'll be successful. They won't make the problem go away, but they might help the government stabilize to the extent that they can drive back ISIL, which is the name of the terrorist group.
Those are good distinctions, Eleanor. Okay. Here's White House Press Secretary Jay Carney's November 2013 spin. November 2013 spin, about 6 months old. More? On leaving U.S. troops behind.
The decision to fully withdraw from Iraq was one made by the Iraqi government and the United States government. And it was the right decision because anyone who believes that the presence of U.S. troops, 5,000, 10,000, 60,000, 100,000, in perpetuity is the answer to solving Iraq's political challenges, I think is just simply wrong. And that's, you know, I think that was part of a sustained debate in the 2008 campaign, and the president was committed to ending the war in Iraq, and he has fulfilled that commitment.
What did you learn from that?
Look, they're trying to make the case that this is essentially Iraq's problem. And I think that within the Washington debate, people who are trying to make Iraq, the failure in Iraq, President Obama's fault, I think that's a hard case to make. You have to oversimplify it, and you have to ignore the role of President Bush before him. Where I think we should be blaming President Obama is, let's not forget that ISIS is not just Iraq, it's also Syria. And I think that this has also flowed out of the absolute chaos in Syria. And there are a lot of people who think that if 2 years ago America had started arming non-extremist rebels in Syria, you'd have seen less chaos coming out of that. And this is a cross-border crisis. And the Syrian half of this crisis, I think, is on President Obama's watch.
There's a big chunk of Syria involved in this commotion.
And the caliphate that they want to create, this Islamic state they want to create, for them, straddles that border.
Why don't you direct the readers to this?
It goes all the way from Aleppo, John, all the way from Aleppo in Syria, all the way to about 40 miles north of Baghdad is where this so-called caliphate is dominated now by the ISIS folks.
Well, and they're doing it with a ragtag band, really, of like 8,000
exactly.
men. I don't think there are any women in that group. Maybe there are, but I
would doubt it.
Baghdad so far is secure. Do you want to speak to that? It's in your current issue of your magazine.
From The Economist. Well, it shows you how essentially what we're looking at is a geopolitical crisis where the borders drawn by French and British diplomats at the end of the colonial era, the Sykes-Picot kind of drawing of the borders, that is being contested all over the Middle East. These borders no longer map the world that these extremists see. They see a Sunni state that crosses over that border as though it doesn't exist.
Bring that map back to the screen, please, and you can point to what we're talking about to get an idea of the volume of land involved. You see the map now on the screen? Mort, are you able to make it with your spectacles?
More or less. I mean, fortunately, my skepticals.
Hey, skeptical of your spectacles? Yes. Uh-oh, you hear that?
Look, whatever else you want to say about this, like it or not, however these geographic lines were drawn, they were drawn. And right now, you have Iraq that is directly adjacent to Saudi Arabia and Jordan, two of our allies, serious allies. We are in a position now where Iraq might become, under its new leadership, shall we say, a radical leadership, might threaten some of our most important interests in that part of the world, will threaten the whole oil market across the entire world. There's a huge amount at risk for us.
What do you think of this? I want the accuracy of it appraised. An extreme Islamist group that seeks to create a caliphate and spread jihad across the world has made dramatic advances on both sides of the Syrian-Iraqi border.
That's right.
And John,
that's exactly what's
John,
happened.
who has been financing these people from the beginning? In Syria, I'll tell you what, they came through Turkey, and the Gulf states are the ones believed to be behind them financially. Qatar and some of these others are heroic allies, Arab allies. At the same time, as I say, Iran and Assad, whom we are against, are the ones fighting them. I mean, the United States policy is just a debacle in the whole region.
Exit question. Do you want to add anything before we continue? You want to defend your map in any way?
Look,
and your piece on it.
I would point out,
the current edition of The Economist.
If you want to get still more depressed, there is a NATO member on the northern edge of that, Turkey. And if Kurdistan in the north of Iraq starts breaking away, then you'll have a NATO member able to call on other NATO allies to come to its assistance. And then we'll discover.
Did you hear that?
Then we'll discover whether.
Did you hear that?
Turkey's
talking about
a NATO member can call upon another NATO. There are 27 members in NATO, right?
Exactly. Why are the Turks not the ones doing the job and finishing these people off?
Exit question. Does it seem to you that President Obama ended the Iraq war in a way that protects our national security interests? Yes or no?
We don't have a vital interest in Iraq, and when the Status of Forces Agreement was denied, he did what he had to do, which was get out and come home.
That's right. The short-term goal is to repel ISIL and then let Iraq go back to having its civil war. The Kurds will probably, they've got a strong army, they will probably break off. Iran will probably protect the Shiites, and the Sunnis will make alliance with the radicals, unfortunately. But there's a 1 million-man army in Iraq. If they can't stand up to this invasion, I don't think it's up to the U.S.
What do you think of this, David? No, he did not end the war in a way that protects our national security interests. Obama ended the war in a way that protected his re-election interests, not our national security interests. The situation today is worse than it was when he became president in 2009. And if ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Iraq establish an independent state, it will become a nightmare. He was handed a victory, and he squandered it.
George W. Bush left office wanting to end the war. He negotiated the Status of Forces Agreement. The Iraqis would not allow U.S. troops to remain, and so There's
a bigger point too, which is that this was not a fantastic success handed to President Obama on a plate. Right. And President Obama has not handled this well. There is blame to go around. But this idea that certainly Republicans are pushing that everything was going fantastically well right until the moment that Obama took office, that's just a fiction. That's a myth.
So you wouldn't subscribe to what was read to you just a moment ago?
I would not.
No. Would you subscribe to it?
No, but I still think that we have enormous national interests involved in what's going on in Iraq today. It is just a huge issue because it could absolutely contaminate that whole part of the world and the energy.
Should we have gone in the first place?
No.
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 We wouldn't be in this mess, John,
and the same
if we hadn't gone in there under Bush and the neoconservatives and, frankly, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
And
he had no choice.
What are you talking about? They didn't have any weapons of mass destruction. I think you were against the original invasion. I know I was.
It was a political vote on Capitol Hill. It was right before the election. If there had been a secret ballot, that war resolution would never have been approved. It's not excusing what they did. They all voted for it.
Yeah, but we wanted the war ended. You did and I did.
I didn't want it begun.
I didn't want it begun either.
All right,
it was a dumb war.